But give us some of your hot takes. Let's hear some of these.
Well, where do we start? All right, I've got it. We'll start here. I think Gabe Tardio just cooked American paddle manufacturers. So we've already seen what they're calling like a counterfeit paddle epidemic, right? And what a counterfeit paddle epidemic means, I think, is a value epidemic, really, right? Like you're not going to go buy something for $30 when the competitor is $300 if the 300 is really worth the price tag, right? So I think Gabe signing with Faculos does a few different things. First off, it shows several of these Asian brands. We have Mihao, we have Li Ning, we had Aeronax, Aero, or something like that. All of these companies just got UPAA approval at the pro game, which means 100% they're eyeing signing pros to use their paddle. Faculos just bought immediate legitimacy in the States. Never saw a Faculos paddle here before. Gabe. It'll be interesting to see how many we see now, but they do have like market legitimacy, and I think that these other companies are going to do the same exact thing. And so,
I mean, Luz is doing that.
Yeah, Luz is a perfect example. And so I think when these companies have their pro players, they're in the same spot as their manufacturing, right? Like they have the Chinese relationships that we in the States are managing from afar with corporate overhead here in the States. I don't think the US companies are ever going to be able to compete on price with the Chinese companies, right? Or just Southeast Asian companies in general, right? And so I think they're going to come in with a product that's almost as good, possibly better, possibly equal, right? But they're going to be able to undercut the price. And in other industries, this happens in every American industry, basically, right? In other industries, the way that you deal with this as an American company is you bring R&D back to the States and you don't teach the people who are actually manufacturing how to do it, right? Or you've built such a big moat around your branding and marketing that if you're buying a brand, you're not buying the actual piece of equipment. I don't think the US companies have built the brand to a point yet, and I don't know if it makes financial sense for them to bring manufacturing or R&D back. So I'd be surprised if we don't see paddles come way down in price to like a reasonable level, and then B, I think a lot of consolidation within like American brands, if you can, I guess, even call them that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go first, and then you can give your take, Isaac. So I think what's interesting about this is, one, I think with these brands in Asia, like I don't think that Faculos is gonna undercut the US brands that much. I mean, you already have Luz, who's like kind of doing that. Like their Luz Cannon is essentially a Yola Pro 4, and it's $100. People are still buying the Pro 4 because, you know, Yola and all the sponsors and yada, yada, yada. And maybe that'll start to shift. But I think even if you undercut a good amount, that sometimes that can almost even hurt you. Like people look at like a Luz Cannon, some people, and will go, oh, well, it's cheaper. Like something's got to be worse, right? Like I think a lot of people don't realize that like cheap, and this is one of the things I was going to cover later, but like cheap brands and expensive brands, like a lot of times the difference is very small in terms of the actual technology being used. Yeah. And I just don't think like someone like Faculos or Luz is really going to damage the market that much. I do think, and this is a topic we are going to cover at some point on the pod, like these counterfeits, I think will have and are having an impact on the industry because they're fed up with like $300 paddles, $280 paddles, and they core crush. It's like, why wouldn't I just go buy the cheaper one? And while I think supporting counterfeits definitely has impacts on the industry that long-term people won't want, like it potentially wipes out more brands or they invest less in the sport. Maybe Pro Tour starts to vanish because you don't have manufacturers investing in players, and like it's like a cascading effect, right?
Sure.
But I also understand why people are buying these paddles, even if there's a bit of damage to the sport. What I think confuses me sometimes is I go, there's a good cheap alternative to almost every popular paddle that is approved and supports the sport. So I'm like, I don't know why we wouldn't just buy that. Like,
sure.
Ronbus, Vatic, Friday, Luz.
Yeah.
Like, why buy the $30 one? I mean, it is cheaper, but
Right. Yeah, and so I that's where I do think that these Asian brands are going to come in the middle, right? I agree. There's a perceived value of sometimes some of these paddles are giffen goods, and that demand goes up as the price goes up.
Yeah.
It doesn't follow a normal demand curve because there's perceived value of it's $300. It's got to be the best. But I mean, people have got to be catching on to the fact that these are within 10-15% variance over time, right? How many
You'd
times?
be surprised.
Yeah, but do you think they're feeding on new people every time, or do you think you have a tremendous amount of repeat customers buying, 10?
I mean, a lot of them, if you think back to like the story when we were eating a minute ago, Sarah, Chris's wife, was saying that, that guy who's a coach kind of pushing paddles on people, new people, that happens constantly.
Yeah.
Where they're just pushing these expensive paddles that people probably shouldn't have, and they just don't know any better. And
also
they find out later.
Way bigger pool of people.
Yeah.
Right. But there's more like uneducated people casually playing than there are like
Exactly.
tournament players who kind of know better.
The enthusiast group of people buying paddles that like are in the sport and kind of know the technologies is really a small consolidated group of people versus the masses. That's why like Selkirk does so many sales. They're not actually selling boomsticks, Luxes, or Power Airs. They're selling these really cheap Amazon sets, or they're selling them at Costco, and people are buying those, and you just see the name Selkirk everywhere. So while I do agree with you, I think the Chinese brands are going to come in and probably kill a lot of brands. The big brands like Selkirk are now just a staple name in pickleball. I think they'll always be around.
Fair. So you think there's a Yola and Selkirk moat, at least in the brand right now?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Other than that, right? So I would agree with you. I don't think that Yola and Selkirk were the ones that I was classifying.
And then
there.
maybe I think I'd probably fit in Carbon in there. They're like just big enough and pretty well-known name in pickleball.
What about Legacy, like Engage, PaddleTech?
Those ones, unless PaddleTech is doing some interesting stuff. I mean, you probably know a lot more than I do. You're signed with them, but Engage, it's not looking good for them.
No,
I mean, they haven't done anything
lot.
in a long time. That's a brand that I'm not obviously banking on, but I've been kind of thinking like, if an American manufacturing brand is going to go, they're going to be one of the first.
I mean, even them, they're doing stuff overseas now, which I don't fault anyone for doing that. That's where like the best performance paddles are coming. They have to if they want to stay alive. But Engage has also just been behind on every time they've done a Chinese style paddle.
And it's expensive.
But like one of the things that I feel like I would like maybe push back on like the argument you're making is I feel like the brands, there's already been so many budget and mid-tier brands that have been really good. Maybe they've been, more enthusiast brands like 11624, which now has Decal, Honolulu, Vatic, Rhombus, Pickleball Apes, Thrive, like all these companies. Basically, the mid-tier market with elite paddles has already existed the entire time. And I still feel like, I'm sure it's done a damage to a Selkirk and a Yola, but it clearly hasn't made the entire market go, you know what, like these paddles should be $150.
Sure, but back to Isaac's point, right? Like, I think we're seeing people transition from people are buying their second and third paddles right now. We had the boom, right, where people are picking up their Selkirk Amazon paddle, or their Club Pro sells you that thing. These people are a little bit more educated now, right? They're either sticking with whatever they already bought, or they're going into that more enthusiast market and buying a handful more paddles. Like once you're a little bit more educated, I don't think you stick with your $300 paddle for that long. When you can if you can understand the trade-off, and that there are some good ones that are coming in.
Or a lot of times what happens is these small enthusiast brands, Vatic 11.6, are not going to be the second or third paddle people buy, because you buy the cheap Amazon or Costco set, then you kind of get into pickleball, you get hooked, then you start seeing pros, and then you just go, well, what they use is what I'm going to buy. Then after that, you spend a ton of money on it. Then you look at like, oh, well, these enthusiast brands are making similar things. That's like, I feel like that's like the third or fourth paddle.
Maybe. I think it just depends like on the demographic, like older versus younger. Younger is probably a little bit more likely to stumble across like a Vatic, less spending power. Like you're trying to make sure every dollar you spend like matters.
Or
a
just
little
doing more research.
Yeah, doing more research. But I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I feel like I had one other point about some paddles I wanted to make related, and now I'm completely spacing on it. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But like also you look at a Gabe with Pickle, dude was not moving paddles. I mean, the only place I really see Pickles are here in Minnesota because the company is from here. And so like maybe Gabe will bring some into the States, but like he didn't really do it for Pickle. So I'm curious if he can do it for
But
Falcolos.
also, I think these Asian brands just have so much more money to start signing pros. I think we're going to really start to see them eat up a lot of players and just start signing a ton of people. I mean, we already see Caitlin Christian and Chris Hayworth sign with Luz. We know Faculos is going to be signing more people. I feel like they're going to sign a lot more. Like it's going to be Yola and then all these Asian brands.
You've got to buy a little bit of legitimacy, right?
Yeah.
And you come in here and you have no, like how would anybody hear about them unless they're throwing tons of dollars in marketing or their paddle really slaps,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think it's a relatively easy way to get in.
Yeah,
still.
definitely.
And, yeah.
But I wonder at what point, because I feel like this is also like a little history lesson that seems to repeat itself in pickleball. So Selkirk, a couple years back, they scoop up all these pros, scoop them up cheap, and now they're like, you know what? Doesn't seem like it was doing much for us. Like, we're going to get rid of them. And we've seen that with like a number of companies where they had a lot of pros and then they kind of scale back because like, it didn't seem like it was actually doing much for us. And like, I'm sure Yola, they started a similar approach. Like, let's scoop everyone up cheap and then we'll dump whoever didn't work. And I'm curious, come a couple years, if they thin their pro roster a lot or if they kind of keep it where it is. But now we've got brands like 11624, Friday, and some other brands, Luz, creeping in where they're like, let's dabble with this.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're going to learn the same lesson eventually, which is it got us to another level, but at some point this caps out and we don't need to spend all this money on these guys.
Yeah, I've never ever understood having a huge pro roster. I completely understand having a couple, right? But there's clear and obvious diminishing returns to multiple pros, right? So let's say you are, Yola right now. What does signing, let's pick an arbitrary pro. What would signing Caitlin Christian in the offseason do for them?
Yeah.
Like, what incremental amount of paddles is she going to move? Gabe takes Faculos from moving 0 paddles to something far more than 0, right? Like, maybe the ROI is there, maybe it's not. We don't know what he's paid, all that stuff. But it's the incremental pros on a huge roster already that have never made sense to me. And I think the biggest culprits over the past few years have been Yola and Selkirk. And we've seen waves of Selkirk doing this, right? In 2020 and before, they had most of the pros. 2020, they dump everybody. 2021, you got the signed graphics. They sign everybody again. Now, dumping everybody again. Like, it just...
But you got to imagine it had to have had at least a pretty decent benefit for Yola signing a bunch of players, I think for a few reasons. And I think it's different with Yola versus Selkirk. Even though they both did the same thing, I think it was much more beneficial for Yola than Selkirk because Yola came out with new tech pretty quickly and came out with something really good pretty quickly, where Selkirk had a lot of people but was really slow with the technology, and that's when they were like, okay, we can't use this anymore, and they started getting a lot of hate. I think the buying a ton of pros for Yola legitimized the company, and now you see, like, what is the number one paddle you see unsigned pros for PPA and APP use? Most of the time, they're probably going to be using Yola because they had such a large roster of signed pros that you just look at it now and go, well, if all these people are using it, I might as well. And now I think they're at the point where they've taken so much market cap that they just don't need to have pros signed anymore. So that's why now they're cutting.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, what is it? Probably like 5 of them that are, if that, are doing all the heavy lifting. It's like the 80-20 rule. It's like, I can't even think of like all the, Yola people that are like more at the bottom, but it's like, Ben is doing big heavy lifting. Anna Bright's probably helping. Like, you just name all these pros. Like,
but I don't know if Yola would have had the same effect on the market if they only signed like Ben and Colin and then didn't sign a ton of other people.
I definitely think it helped. I mean, they're on like every podium for the PBA.
Yeah, I can understand it. Like, they wanted to come in and uproot Selkirk as like the top dog, and I think they did. I understand it, but I also see that roster potentially receding.
Yeah. No, for Yola?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I have no doubt it will at some point. I'd be shocked if it did. And it's just funny to me to see this like kind of keep repeating itself. I'm like, do all these other brands not like see what I'm seeing? Like, I don't know. I think entering is fine, but you go crazy and start signing like 8+ people. I mean, maybe even more than 5. Why not just invest heavily in those 5 and make sure they're good?
I completely agree.
And they win a lot.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah. You should have one guy, one girl, maybe a couple supporting players, and a bunch of juniors.
Yeah, well, juniors is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Juniors
might take a while for it to pay off.
Maybe, but not. I mean, you're already seeing a bunch of juniors have really good success. Like Tomo is probably a pretty good acquisition for Selkirk. Yeah. You know, Cam, great for who's he with now?
Isn't he with Pickle?
I think he's a Pickle. Yeah, he's still with Pickle. So I don't know. Juniors, I think investing into juniors, I think is going to be a smart move for a lot of brands.